Hi, I'm Blayne Arthur, Oklahoma Secretary of Agriculture. My daily responsibilities are primarily at the Oklahoma Department of Ag, Food, and Forestry as the agency head working with all of our staff here at the department, but I also provide guidance to the governor and his team on all ag policy related issues.
Hi, I'm JanLee Rowlett, Deputy Commissioner here at the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, and I have the opportunity to work with Secretary Arthur, and really my main responsibility is to represent the agency at the Capitol with the state legislature and help them understand how different policies might impact both the Oklahoma Department of Ag as a state agency, but also Oklahoma's ag industry.
Here in Oklahoma, the Secretary of Agriculture is actually, that cabinet position is in the Constitution, which is very unique. There's only 2 of those, and the responsibility of whomever serves as the Secretary of Agriculture has several different components. If you're from another state besides Oklahoma, your ag secretary there may be a secretary, they might be a commissioner, and they might be a director. So there's several different names for those ag leaders as you look across the landscape of Oklahoma. Here in Oklahoma, we're unique in that the Secretary of Agriculture is the Secretary of Agriculture, but also the Commissioner of Agriculture, serves in those dual roles, and the Commissioner portion is tied to our State Board of Ag. There are 5 members of the State Board of Ag. The Commissioner and the President is whomever the governor has selected to be the Secretary of Agriculture. Then there are also 4 board members who represent the different quadrants of the state. So Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest, those individuals are appointed by the governor. Those are 4-year appointments, and those roll over time. So at any point in time, you may have individuals serving on the Board of Ag, some that may have been appointed by a previous governor, some that may be appointed by the current governor. Here right now, all of our board members have been appointed by Governor Stitt to serve on the Board of Ag, and as those appointments finish up, the governor can either choose to reappoint that particular individual to the Board of Agriculture or find someone else to serve in that capacity. We as ag producers are very glad that the statute is very clear regarding our Board of Ag members here in Oklahoma, that they have to have their primary source of income be from production agriculture for at least the last 10 years. Why that's important is because the changing nature and face of ag, and certainly different thoughts on production agriculture, it'd be very concerning to us to have someone maybe from a group like HSUS or PETA be appointed to a Board of Ag, and you can understand the impacts that that would have, because ultimately the Board of Agriculture here in the state of Oklahoma, those 5 folks, myself included, have to approve all the actions of all of the folks who work here at the agency. So that's everything from budget approvals to contracts that we enter into with the private sector, with the federal government. So very important folks. We're very proud of our Board of Ag members, very strong ag producers here in the state of Oklahoma who understand production ag, but also understand the importance of state government and how those 2 pieces work together.
The Oklahoma Department of Ag is made up of 11 different divisions that all have different focus areas. So everything from animal industry services, where our state veterinarian is officed, to consumer protection services, and lots of different things in between. We have about 400, a little over 400 employees that are all make up our agency.
Ag agencies are very diverse, and here in Oklahoma, there's several agencies that fall under the Ag Cabinet. We've got the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, which is very regulatory. We also have the Oklahoma Conservation Commission, a very non-regulatory agency. We have the Oklahoma Horse Racing Commission, we have the Oklahoma Vet Board, and then we have several entities that are quasi-state agencies, like our Oklahoma Wheat Commission, Oklahoma Peanut Commission, and several of the oilseed commissions. The Oklahoma Conservation Commission also has offices in 80 different locations here in the state of Oklahoma, and so those employees work for conservation there at a district level, but also report to the Oklahoma Conservation Commission here at the state level.
And I'll just add to that, and specifically the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, when you compare us as a state agency to what our equivalent would be on a federal level, we kind of are, as to Oklahoma, what the USDA is to the federal government. So here in Oklahoma, we are in charge and tasked with implementing all state laws that have to do with ag. So we go through the administrative rules process to kind of figure out the nuts and bolts once the legislature passes a statute that impacts our ag industry. So we figure out all of the fine details. Another example would be we think about other federal agencies, the Environmental Protection Agency. The Oklahoma equivalent of that would be the Department of Environmental Quality. So if you think about state agencies and federal agencies here at the state level, we kind of mirror what a lot of those federal agencies are. In some cases have different names, but there is pretty much a state agency that is tasked with similar roles on a federal level, and we work kind of in cooperation with those federal partners, and then also here in Oklahoma across agency lines too, and help each other kind of achieve all of those goals that the legislature ultimately tasks us with.
And we have lots of folks who ask about USDA and USDA programming, and of course that is our federal counterpart, but it is very unique in that there are lots of programs that are owned by the USDA, several of them by different arms of the USDA like the FSIS and Veterinary Services, and so we have state employees who actually do work for the federal entity, so that's very confusing to folks and certainly to producers sometimes, because we may have state employees who are doing work for the federal government but are actually state employees. So we have lots of cooperative agreements, but ultimately anything federal supersedes our regulations and authority here at the state level.
Sometimes I think people can get confused, and there are a lot of acronyms thrown in government. But if you think about kind of the big umbrella of USDA, there are several sub-agencies that fall within that. So examples would be FSIS, the Food Safety Inspection Service. Here on the state level, our Food Safety Division works closely with them. Another example would be our state veterinarian working with the sub-agency of USDA that's called APHIS, or Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. So there are lots of smaller agencies that kind of make up the USDA, and our staff work closely with them in lots of different ways. I would say lobbyists really play a key role in developing ag policy, and ultimately what farmers and ranchers kind of all sizes across our state have to deal with in their day-to-day operations. Here in Oklahoma, most of our ag lobbyists represent ag organizations that are really membership organizations. So those are all driven by the internal policy that their members, who are typically farmers and ranchers or ag producers, help set. So their lobbyists are hired by those organizations to go to the Capitol or come here to us as an agency and advance their positions on different topics. So I think it's just kind of highlights the need to really be involved in those organizations and be engaged in setting what those policies are, because ultimately that's what legislators, us as an agency, all branches of government hear from those organizations, and we use that input on a daily basis, I would say, here at the Department of Ag.
And I think also important to note that we as a state agency, we cannot lobby members of the legislature here in the state of Oklahoma. We can provide education and answers to their questions, but we are state employees. We're paid by taxpayer dollars, so we don't serve a lobbying function. Certainly we work with several lobbyists on all sides of issues, but we can just answer questions and provide education to members of the Oklahoma legislature. The budget process is very unique here in the state of Oklahoma. I think certainly one of the great things is we have to have a balanced budget every year. And truly that budget process typically starts in the early fall. Our legislative session runs through the 1st of February to the end of May. Our budget year ends June 30th and begins July 1st. And so we as an agency are a state appropriated agency. That means that the legislature, as they work through their budget planning, decide how much or how little to give to every agency that is a state appropriated agency. We at the Department of Ag are state appropriated, but there are several state agencies that are not. They are funded by other other revenue sources. And so we'll start that discussion in the early fall and work with members of the legislature through session. Certainly in my capacity as a cabinet member, we also work very much in tandem with the governor and with all of the governor's chief policy staff to make certain that we are focused on funding priorities of the governor and funding priorities of the cabinet as a whole. Here in Oklahoma, our appropriations chairs on both sides, so that would be our House Appropriations Chair and our Senate Appropriations Chair, work very diligently with all the agencies, and everyone has a specific request, and most of the time those are additional funding requests. And so lots of conversations that go on kind of almost all through the year to make sure that we get towards the end of session and we have a balanced budget and that we're making certain to fund all core services of state government.
And I'll just add on to that with an example. Secretary Arthur mentioned that we are an appropriated agency, so we are engaged somewhat in that process, and usually that starts with a request from our agency. So we'll go over and talk with legislators about what that request might be. An example from this past year was the need for some additional funds to add more state meat inspectors across Oklahoma. We've seen kind of a boom in that sector of the industry in the last several months. Mostly driven by the pandemic, but needed more state meat inspectors to get out and meet the demand for that inspection. So we needed some extra funding for that, so started working with legislators early on. In the big scheme of things, we would say that was a pretty small request given the size of the budget for the state, but just wanted to be sure that they had the information and understood the need and what the impact of those dollars would be. So continue to have that conversation through the legislative session, and then ultimately we're appropriated those funds, so we'll be hiring 5 new meat inspectors in fiscal year 2022, and look forward to adding them to our staff. And I think that's a really good example of how we as an agency make a request, the legislature understands that need, fulfill that, and then we'll put that into action as a state agency.
And certainly receive a big portion of state dollars to operate our budget here at the state level, but we also have several cooperative agreements with other partners. The majority of those are with USDA. Here at the Department of Ag, about half of our budget is state appropriated dollars, and the other half of that comes from those federal cooperative agreements where, as I mentioned before, we're implementing programs, be they food safety or animal health programs. So we have federal dollars that also flow to the state and to the agency, so that we're able to do all the work that's important to our ag producers. The Department of Ag here at the state level is very much a regulatory entity, and you may think, okay, what does that mean to me as a producer? We regulate a variety of things from feed, seed, fertilizer, poultry operations, swine operations, and the regulations that we implement, as JanLee kind of mentioned earlier, those rules and that guidance is given to us from the state legislature. So over time, the legislature has created laws and put those into statute, and then they direct our staff here at the Department of Agriculture to implement those and make certain that ag producers or citizens here in the state of Oklahoma are following those rules and guidelines. So you as a producer may have one of our scale trucks that comes to your place. If you have a big scale, a ranch scale there, and that scale has to be in compliance. So our scale trucks are out checking scales all across the state of Oklahoma, very likely checking the scale at your co-op where you may do business. And if those scales are out of compliance, this is just a very specific example of a program, then they will put a hold on those scales. Once those scales are back into compliance, you can begin into commerce once again. But we have a lot of things in place to make sure that we're providing protection to consumers and certainly to producers on both sides. When we talk about feed, seed, and fertilizer, when you buy a bag of feed at the feed store, or we can maybe say cattle cubes, if you're buying 30% protein cattle cubes, have you ever wondered if that's actually the protein percentage that's in there? Because you're paying for that. We have staff that do random sampling of feed, seed, and fertilizer in all the locations and feed stores across the state of Oklahoma, so that you as a producer, when you're purchasing that product, you have assurance that that's actually what you're paying for. As we do that sampling, if any of those products are out of compliance, they again will be pulled off the shelf, put a stop sale in place, and we will work with that company, with that co-op, with that entity to get them into compliance. Now, if we have some someone who chooses not to be in compliance, we have the ability as a regulatory agency to assess fines to ensure that they will come into compliance. So there's probably a lot of things that our staff do that you don't think about, but we're also making certain that all the food that arrives at your shelves or on your dinner table is also safe, and we have inspectors out in dairies on a very regular basis to be checking all of those milk and dairy products. So lots of regulatory things. I think the thing for you all to really understand is we don't make up the rules here at the Department of Agriculture. That direction is given to us from the Oklahoma State Legislature, and then our staff implement all of those programs. Now certainly those change over time, so every legislative session they may make a tweak to a particular program, and so then that will change the work that our inspectors and our staff here at the Department of Ag do. So we're following that guidance and implementing that all across the state of Oklahoma. We certainly take complaints from folks that call in regarding a variety of programs, but making sure with our regulatory approach that we're really working to get people into compliance. We don't like to play the gotcha game here at the Department of Ag, Food and Forestry. We want to work with producers or business owners to help them get into compliance instead of just walking in and finding someone initially. We give them opportunity to adjust and make certain that they're following the rules.
And I'll just add, I think some of those examples that you gave about what the department does and what some of those programs look like are really good illustrations of why it's important that we have people that make up our team here at the Department of Ag that have at least some familiarity, and most of them have some ag production background because they're out working directly with farmers and ranchers every day, or consumers. So really knowing what ag is and where their food comes from is a huge kind of feather in our cap, I guess, and reason for us to be proud. And I think it sets our agency apart in that we have people out there working with producers every day that understand and can take kind of a real world and common sense look at what they are doing every day and can apply those rules in a way that we hope aren't too restrictive but still serve as protection for producers and consumers. Another thing Secretary Arthur talked about, and I think the biggest part of our agency definitely is regulatory. That's a huge part of what we do. But another role and an important part of your job is to balance that with promoting our industry. So we also are an agency that has a mission to create new opportunities for ag producers and consumers. Our market development division is a great example of that. They have staff that their job every day is to find new ways for producers to sell the commodities that they're producing and get them into new markets. So examples would be our Made in Oklahoma program to help small businesses get started if they have a product that they want to sell and create a new market for. Also international trade, if it's a bigger company or a company that is doing well here in the United States but they're interested in shipping some product overseas and opening those new markets, we help with that too. So while a lot of what we do is regulatory and enforcing rules in the industry, a huge part of another aspect of our agency is making sure that there are new opportunities created too.
And we also work to be a resource. There's a lot of things that fall under our umbrella of regulatory authority, but we also work in tandem with other state agencies. So that might be the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, here in Oklahoma. That might be the Health Department here in Oklahoma, where we have lines where they have authority and we have authority. So we may have a producer that calls us and says, we're having a challenge with XYZ state agency. And sometimes it may be a federal agency as well. And so we try to build those relationships. If it's something even at the local level, they might be having challenges with a municipality on zoning or other issues. And so we try to bring everyone together to the table, go out and talk to people in person in their districts, work with legislators sometimes to address issues that may be a legislative fix that a certain producer needs. So we have good communication across all those spheres, certainly here at the state level with other agencies, but also lots of partners at the federal level, and when needed, engage with local authorities too, because depending on the particular issue, we may or may not have authority, but we want to help work towards a positive solution. We really appreciate the opportunity to share some information with your class today. We love that students have an interest in the Department of Ag and the work that we do here every day, For more information, you can certainly visit our website, which is www.ag.ok.gov. You can find a variety of information there, but we certainly encourage students to maybe reach out to some of our staff to spend a day or a couple of days with us job shadowing, or invite you to look at some of our internships that we have during the summer. And two, we have lots of job opportunities. So I assume you're interested, hopefully, in an ag career since you're taking this class, but a lot of opportunities everywhere from the animal health side over to our forestry division, or maybe in our laboratory as a chemist or biologist. So a variety of job opportunities, and we're always looking for talented, qualified folks who want to come and work for the state. So glad to have the opportunity to visit with you, and look forward to hearing from you soon.